In the golden haze of a Texas sunset, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the weathered gate of a sprawling ranch, its tires crunching over gravel like bones underfoot. Out stepped a man in a crisp suit, clipboard in hand, his face etched with the smug authority of someone used to getting their way. He represented the HOA of Willow Creek Estates, a gated community of manicured lawns and identical McMansions just beyond the ranch's borders. The notice he carried was a dagger wrapped in legalese. 72 hours for the ranch's owner, a black man named Marcus, to sell his property or face legal eviction. Marcus stood on his porch, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the fading light, watching the intruder approach. At 58, his hands were calloused from years of tending cattle and mending fences, his eyes sharp with the wisdom of survival. The notice accused him of violating community standards. His ranch was an eyesore, they claimed, with its dusty trails and lowing herds disrupting the pristine suburbia. But beneath the surface it reeked of something fouler, the unspoken disdain for a black man holding onto prime land in a predominantly white enclave. As the suit-wearer thrust the paper forward, Marcus's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. He took the document without a word, his gaze steady and unyielding. The HOA had underestimated him, seeing only a solitary figure on outdated land. They didn't know the history buried in that soil, the secrets it held. That night, under a canopy of stars, Marcus pored over old deeds in his dimly lit study, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and determination. By dawn, he had a plan, not one of surrender, but of swift, calculated retribution. The community buzzed with anticipation, whispers of triumph circulating among the residents. They imagined the ranch bulldozed, replaced by more luxury homes. But Marcus's response would shatter their illusions. In a single, audacious move, he would turn their aggression against them, tripling their rent overnight and exposing the fragility of their borrowed empire. The stage was set for a reckoning, where the oppressed would rise and the land itself would demand justice. Marcus Thompson had always been a man of the earth, rooted deeply in the 500-acre ranch that sprawled across the Texas plains like a living testament to resilience. Born in the shadow of segregation, he grew up hearing stories from his grandfather, Elijah, a sharecropper who had scraped together pennies during the Jim Crow era to buy this very land in the 1950s. Elijah's purchase was a quiet act of defiance. Black man claiming ownership in a state where such ambitions were often met with violence or sabotage. Through sheer grit, he transformed barren fields into a thriving cattle operation, passing it to his son and eventually to Marcus. By the time Marcus inherited the ranch in the early 2000s, the world around it had changed. Urban sprawl crept in, and developers eyed the fertile soil. What Marcus didn't sell outright, he leased portions of to fund improvements. One such lease went to a real estate firm that built Willow Creek Estates, a luxurious subdivision boasting golf courses, swimming pools, and strict covenants. The residents, mostly affluent white professionals who had fled the city for peaceful suburbs, formed an HOA to enforce their vision of perfection. They paid ground rent to Marcus annually, a detail buried in fine print that few bothered to question, assuming the land was theirs in perpetuity. Marcus lived simply, his days filled with the rhythm of ranch life, dawn patrols on horseback, repairing irrigation systems, and negotiating with buyers for his grass-fed beef. He employed a small crew, including young Black and Latino workers he mentored, teaching them skills his grandfather had taught him. The ranch wasn't just property, it was legacy, a sanctuary where he could escape the subtle slights of the outside world, the stares in town, the extra scrutiny from law enforcement, the assumptions that a man like him couldn't possibly own such vast acreage. Yet, as Willow Creek grew, so did the friction. The HOA's letters started innocuously. Complaints about dust from his tractors wafting over their fences, or the occasional escaped cow wandering into their yards. Marcus addressed them politely, but the tone shifted over time. Anonymous tips to authorities about code violations led to inspections that found nothing amiss. Social media posts from residents hinted at deeper prejudices, decrying the outdated farm as a blight on their property values, with veiled references to certain types not fitting the community's image. Marcus sensed the undercurrent of racism, a familiar poison from his youth. He had faced it before. Redlining that blocked loans for black farmers, discriminatory pricing from suppliers. But he remained steadfast, contributing to local charities and even sponsoring community events. Still, the HOA's board, led by figures who golfed with influential politicians, grew bolder. They viewed his ranch as an obstacle to expansion, a remnant of a less refined era. Unbeknownst to them, the lease agreement Elijah had crafted decades ago gave Marcus ultimate control over the land beneath their homes. It was a safeguard against exploitation, one that would soon prove invaluable as tension simmered toward a boil. Asterisk. The first cracks in the facade appeared subtly, like weeds pushing through concrete. Marcus noticed them in the increased frequency of HOA patrols along his property line. Drones buzzing overhead, ostensibly to monitor compliance, but really to intimidate. One evening, as he mended a fence, a group of residents gathered on the other side, their voices carrying on the wind with complaints about the stench of manure ruining their barbecues. Though no words were exchanged, their glares spoke volumes, laced with the entitlement of those who believed the land should bend to their whims. Over the months, the incidents escalated. Marcus's water rights, grandfathered in from Elijah's era, came under fire when the HOA petitioned the county to reallocate resources for their expanding golf course. Anonymous reports claimed his irrigation was wasteful, ignoring the sustainable practices he had implemented. When inspectors arrived, they found his systems efficient, but the harassment continued. Marcus's truck was vandalized in town. Tires slashed with slurs scratched into the paint. Go back to the city. He reported it, but the investigation stalled, dismissed as random mischief. The community's social fabric unraveled further as racial undertones surfaced openly. At HOA meetings, which Marcus occasionally attended as a leaseholder, board members spoke of preserving the neighborhood's character, code for excluding anyone who didn't match their demographic. One resident, a retired executive, circulated a petition to buy out the ranch, framing it as a community improvement project. They hired lawyers to comb through records, seeking loopholes to force a sale. Marcus, ever vigilant, consulted his own attorney, a sharp-minded woman from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who confirmed his ironclad ownership. As winter turned to spring, the pressure intensified. Marcus's employees faced scrutiny. One young worker was pulled over repeatedly by local police on his way to the ranch, cited for minor infractions. Supplies deliveries were delayed, suppliers citing payment issues that didn't exist. The HOA ramped up fines for alleged violations, noise from his machinery, visual pollution from his barns. Bills piled up, designed to bleed him dry. Marcus dipped into savings, his face growing lined with stress, but his resolve hardened. He spent nights in his study, poring over yellowed documents from Elijah's time. Deeds, leases, maps, showing how the ranch encompassed not just his fields, but the foundational land under Willow Creek. The breaking point loomed when a developer, allied with the HOA, offered Marcus a lowball buyout. It was insulting, half the market value, presented as generosity. Rejecting it, Marcus uncovered emails leaked by a sympathetic insider, board discussions laced with bigotry, referring to him as that rancher, with implications he was unfit to own such property. The injustice burned in his chest, a fire stoked by generations of similar slights. His grandfather had endured lynch mobs and land grabs. His father, discriminatory loans. Now it was Marcus's turn to fight, not with fists, but with the power. Embedded in the soil. Gathering evidence, Marcus traced the lease history. Elijah had leased the land to the developers with a clause allowing rent adjustments based on community impact. It was vague enough to exploit, especially since the HOA had expanded without permission, building on additional acres. Armed with this, Marcus prepared. The 72-hour notice arrived like a thunderclap, citing eminent domain threats and violations. That could lead to seizure. It was their final gambit, assuming he would fold under the timeline's pressure dot. But Marcus didn't panic. Instead, he methodically reviewed the leases, calculating the new rates. The community paid a nominal ground rent, unchanged for years. Tripling it would hit their pockets hard, enough to force reconsiderations. He contacted his lawyer to draft the notices, ensuring every step was legal. As the clock ticked, tension blanketed the ranch. Neighbors spied from their windows, confident in victory. Marcus, however, felt a quiet surge of empowerment, the land whispering secrets of retribution. The night before the deadline, Marcus walked his property under the moonlit sky, touching the earth that had sustained his family. It was more than dirt, it was blood, sweat, and unyielding spirit. The HOA's actions weren't just about land, they were an attempt to erase his presence, to whitewash history. But history doesn't erase easily. As dawn broke, Marcus finalized his response. Ready to unleash the storm asterisk, the HOA boardroom hummed with anticipation on the evening of the 72-hour mark. The air conditioned and sterile, a stark contrast to the raw heat of Marcus's ranch. Board members sat around a polished table, sipping coffee, their faces alight with premature victory. They had called an emergency meeting to celebrate the resolution of the ranch issue, assuming Marcus had capitulated or fled. Whispers of development plans filled the room, expanding the subdivision, perhaps a new clubhouse on his former land. Marcus arrived unannounced, his boots leaving faint dust trails on the carpet. The room fell silent as he entered, his presence commanding despite the simple flannel shirt and jeans. He carried a briefcase, its leather worn like his hands. The board chair, a silver-haired man with a perpetual smirk, cleared his throat, masking surprise. This was their territory, their rules. But Marcus stood tall, his eyes scanning the faces that had orchestrated his torment. Without preamble, he opened the briefcase and distributed copies of ancient deeds and current leases. The papers fluttered like accusations. He revealed the truth they had ignored. The entire Willow Creek estates sat on land leased from his ranch, arrangement dating back to Elijah's shrewd negotiations. The HOA's expansions had violated terms, encroaching without consent. Their notice to him was toothless. He held the power. The room shifted uneasily as realization dawned. Marcus explained the clause allowing rent adjustments for impacts on the lesser. Their harassment, the racial bias evident in records he now presented, leaked emails, petition language, constituted severe impact. Effective immediately, he announced the ground rent would triple. What had been affordable would now strain budgets, forcing dues hikes or relocations. Panic rippled through the board. Some blustered about lawsuits, but Marcus's lawyer, joining via video, dismantled their arguments. The leases were binding, the adjustments legal. Overnight, their empire crumbled. Residents outside the room, eavesdropping, murmured in shock. Marcus's voice remained steady, his words a blade honed by injustice. This wasn't mere revenge. It was reclamation. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, Marcus left without looking back. The weight of generations lifted slightly from his shoulders. The climax had peaked, the tables turned in a single, decisive reveal. Asterisk in the days following. The meeting, Willow Creek Estates, transformed from a bastion of complacency to a hive of reckoning. The tripled rent notices arrived in mailboxes like unwelcome ghosts, detailing the new rates and the reasons, documented harassment, lease violations, and the need for equitable compensation. Residents faced stark choices: pay up, challenge in court at great expense, or sell and leave. Many opted for the latter, property values dipping as the scandal spread via local news and social media. Marcus watched from his ranch, the herds grazing peacefully as moving trucks dotted the horizon. He didn't gloat. Satisfaction came from restoration, not destruction. The increased revenue allowed him to modernize the operation, solar panels, better equipment, and establish a foundation supporting black farmers facing similar discriminations. He hired more staff, turning the ranch into a hub for agricultural education, where youth learned not just farming, but the history of land ownership in America. The HOA dissolved amid lawsuits and infighting, its leaders exposed for their biases. Some residents reflected deeply, a few even approaching Marcus with apologies, though he accepted them with quiet grace rather than warmth. The land, once a battleground, reclaimed its peace. Marcus walked the fields daily, feeling Elijah's spirit in the wind, a reminder that justice, though delayed, can erupt with force. This tale, inspired by real accounts of racial land disputes in America's heartland, underscores a profound truth. Injustice thrives in silence, but empowerment lies in knowledge and resilience. What happens when the marginalized wield the tools of the oppressors? It forces society to confront its shadows, urging us all to question. In a world built on unequal foundations, who truly owns the ground we stand on? Reflect on that, and perhaps share your thoughts. Has racism touched your life, and how did you rise above it?